Greetings and salutations, Greek students. We continue our study of the Greek language and continue our study particularly of the aorist tense by looking at what's called the second aorist. Now, an important part of learning any language is learning the irregular forms of how the language works that make obvious sense to native speakers, but to outsiders are frustrating. That's what we're running into when we get to the second aorist. So let's get into it. This happens in English where the past tense of go becomes went. This makes perfect sense to us. We don't even think about it, but it makes no sense to non-native English speakers. Numerous Greek verbs have what are called second aorist stems, which means that the stem of the verb changes in the aorist tense, and it's parsed like an imperfect verb, but it has an aorist meaning. So I want to say that again. The stem changes, so hamartano becomes hemarta, hemart, and eurisko becomes euron, horao becomes edon, gnosko becomes egnon, lego becomes apon, lambano becomes elabon. So the stem changes, but then the rest of the parsing looks like what we'd expect from an imperfect. On, sa, amen, ede, on. But it's not an imperfect, it's a second aorist. So what we have to be able to pay attention to is first the stem change, and then be able to identify with the stem change, oh, I'm looking at a second aorist. Okay, so let's look at some examples. I already talked about this. Hamartano, the verb I sin, hamartano, in the second aorist, so the simple past. Now, when I say second aorist, this is the aorist tense, so it means the same thing. I sinned, hemartan, or hemartes, you sinned, hemarten, he sinned. Right? It's that simple snapshot past tense. So there's nothing grammatically, syntactically different about the aorist from the second aorist. What it is that there are some verbs that, when they go to the aorist tense, become kind of irregular. And Clayton Croy provides more examples of this on page 79 of his Primer of Biblical Greek. I've just given you a snapshot of a couple. Two that you really need to know because you end up seeing them quite a bit in the New Testament is horao and lego. Now, you almost never see horao in its lexical form, but you always see edon, edes, eden, edamen, edete, edon. So you see this especially like in the book of Revelation, and I saw, kai edon. So you see lots of sight, vision things, edon, edes, eden, edamen, edete, I saw in the second aorist. Lego becomes apon, apes, apin, epamen, epete, epon. You see apin all the time in the Gospels where you have Jesus having conversations where, and then he said, apin. So these are forms you see a lot, and you need to be aware of them and just recognize them. Honestly, you Lego and apon, you sort of go, well, why does Lego become apon? Why does go become what? It just happens. So there are more examples, but these are ones that are particularly common. The second aorist middle indicative, lambano, for example, again, you see that epsilon prefix. I receive myself. So it's the key here is, again, the aorist has different forms for the middle voice and the passive voice. So this is just aorist middle. And again, here the stem change. Notice the lambano has become lab. So the mu has dropped from the stem, and that's the signal. When you see that stem change, you're going, oh, wait a minute, blinking light, I'm in second aorist. Even though it looks like an imperfect middle passive or an imperfect active form, the stem change is my blinking red light. Oh, I'm looking at a second aorist. So I receive myself, you receive yourself, so on and so forth in the middle form, elabamen, elabu, elabeta, elabamatha, elabeste, elabanta. Second aorist infinitives. Now this is interesting. Second aorist verbs will be present infinitives in form, but aorist in meaning. So, balo, from I throw, I cast, I throw the ball. Balo, when the stem changes and you drop one of the lambdas, balein, even though it looks like just the present too loose, it's the aorist. Now, in the infinitive, the tense shift is not about when the verb happens. It's about the way the action is being described. So if I'm looking at an aorist infinitive, I'm just getting that snapshot. But if I'm looking at the present infinitive, I'm getting that imperfective ongoing movie clip description of the verb. So lambano, again, the stem change to labain, to receive, that's aorist. Apin, lego to apin, becomes a pain to say. So this is an example of how the second aorist works. Again, these irregular forms. Grammatically, there's no difference between the second aorist and the aorist in terms of what the verb is doing, simple past action, snapshot. But you have to be ready to notice, first of all, the stem change, and then be recognizing, oh, the stem has changed. I'm not looking at it imperfect, even though it looks imperfect in the ending. It's a second aorist. We'll look at some specific examples of these in a moment.